The story begins with a lady who was experiencing humiliation from the noble ladies at the banquet. She was caught off guard when someone suddenly poured a glass of wine on her, which dampened her long orange hair, which had lightly affected her dress. Some gasped in shock, while others failed to suppress their laughter upon witnessing what happened. The lady who humiliated her stood arrogantly on the upper floor of the hall, and she just sarcastically apologized to Lady Lindsay, claiming that she did not realize that she was there. She even acted as if she was worried, wondering what she must do about it, as she commented that she looked like a pitiful drowned rat. But Lady Lindsay merely forced a smile and assured them that she was just fine. She even noted that the wine smelled like a fresh fruit, so it was actually kind of nice. By faking her expression, she showed everyone that she did not resent the mean lady. However, her response only irritated them more, glaring at her since they had not expected her to handle her situation that way. As she took her way to leave, they whispered that she was just pretending to be nice. Knowing that she was already far enough from the crowd, she just let out a silent groan at how damp she was. While wiping herself with her hand, she could not help but complain, wondering who in the world had sent her an invitation to that event. Since it came in the name of the imperial family, she knew that it was a matter that she could not ignore. Holding her forehead in irritation, Lady Lindsay thought that even though she understood why those women disliked her, throwing a drink on her all of a sudden was already a bit too much. The reason she was experiencing torment was all because of the trouble that the real Charlotte Lynde had caused. Originally, she was the one who treated others with blatant disdain. There had been an incident where a humble lady apologized to her sincerely and swore not to repeat the same mistake again. But the villainess suddenly slapped her face, which made her wince. Without any guilt on her face, she stated that she hoped not to see her face ever again because for her it was disgusting. She even had a snickering face while boldly remarking on it. The lady who had long orange hair and a pair of green eyes was none other than Lady Charlotte Lynde, the eldest daughter of the powerful Marquis Lindsay family. Moreover, she was the villainess from the romance fantasy web novel titled Finding a Husband. That confirmed that they were only in the fantasy world of a popular story, which had already reached almost 10 million views and gotten a very high rating. Unfortunately, one of its readers was an unlucky victim who possessed the character of the villainess who was obsessed with the male lead, who was Duke Hicklede, and even committed terrible acts against the women around him. That was how she ended up touching the female lead named Isla. In the moment of jealousy, Charlotte had harmed her, an act that greatly angered Duke Hicklede. Originally, because of the Duke's pressure, Charlotte should have been disowned by the Lynde family. However, something happened that altered what was supposed to happen. When her father interrogated her about her wrongdoings, his voice was calm yet intimidating, and she had nothing to say. Her body trembled anxiously, and she called her father. Clenching her fist, she took her courage to admit that she was wrong. The Marquis was taken aback by her expression, showing fear at the consequences of her bad action. But the truth was, the reader had possessed the character at exactly that moment, so she begged her father and barely managed to stop herself from being disowned. She could not just let herself get kicked out without anything right after she realized that she had come into that world, thinking that it was so unfair for her. While thinking about the possible outcome if she could still hold on until 6 months before they would send her to a villa abroad, she was halted when she noticed some commotion at the event. Seeing how the ladies flocked to that single spot like crows, she wondered what they were swarming around. As she observed further, she found out that it was because of a man who had just arrived. But to her surprise, the guy who was acknowledging the girls who were admiring him, she recognized that it was Kyrie, the second male lead of the story, a genius wizard and the likely next master of the magic tower. Charlotte could not believe that he was a real person and, on top of that, he was indeed looking at him at that moment. She had heard that he was popular with women because of his mysterious look, and right at that moment, she had proven that it was true. In fact, he was even more captivating than how he was described in the book. However, his presence only made her think further, trying to remember which part of the story it was that Kyrie had attended in that event. While in the middle of her contemplation, she was distracted when she noticed a bright light coming from the hall, making her wonder where it was coming from. When she looked, she saw a man radiating honor and excellence by just appearing in the crowd. Having blonde hair and a pair of blue eyes, there was no doubt that he was Reynard Baldock Leonberg, the second male lead of the story, as well as the crown prince of the Leonberg Empire. Upon being dazzled by the bright light, Lady Lynde covered her eyes while peeking a little at him. Just like what she had expected, the son of the Empire, the #1 second male lead, Crown Prince Reynard, would also be there. To think that she would see so many important people at the banquet where she was only forced to attend, she felt like they were celebrities and she wanted to have His Highness's autograph. However, she was frightened when she realized that she had no time for her fangirling. Thinking that there were 2 second male leads in there, then surely at that banquet, there was a high probability that she would meet the bigger person of the novel. So before that happened, she frantically made her way out, as she wanted to leave quickly. Upon noticing the lady leaving, Crown Prince Reynard glanced at her from the corner of his eye. The young lady looked around when she got into a secluded place. As she confirmed that no one was around, she thought that she could just escape and leave the palace. However, before she could formulate a plan, she suddenly bumped into someone, which really hurt her face. While she was enduring it, she heard the deep voice of the person she had just bumped into calling her full name, Charlotte Lindsay. With his frowning face, he showed displeasure on seeing her again and inquired whether she did not ever get tired of her attempts. He was Cedric Nicklede, the main male lead of the novel, while the young lady who was clinging to his arms was Isla Beam, the female lead. In other words, they were the people she had never wanted to run into. Charlotte felt so busted upon seeing them. The chance of meeting them was indeed the reason why she was trying to get away quickly. The Duke then questioned whether the warning that he had given her last time was not enough. But she only raised her hand to deny his claim and stated that it seemed like there was a misunderstanding. However, while she was trying to clear herself, she heard the ladies behind her whispering about her. Noting that it seemed like Lady Lindsay had approached the Duke and his fiancée again, the one mocked that she really had no fear and wondered if she was not afraid of Duke Nicklede, the Lion of the North. Instead of paying attention to them, she just tried to escape from her situation. Giving a brief apology to the Duke for bumping into them, she immediately told them that she would be going now and reminded them to just send the dry cleaning bill to the Lind family. But that only annoyed him, as he even shouted to call her, claiming that they were not done talking yet. While Isla only told Cedric to stop, trying to calm him. However, he did not listen to his fiancée, as he even tried to chase Charlotte, demanding that she explain her lame excuse. But upon following her, he was halted when he crossed his path with a tall man and ordered him to move aside. That man also had an important role in the story. He was Yukon Mont, another second male lead, the leader of the Ness mercenaries, and a Marquis of the Leonberg Empire. While looking up to Marquis Mont, Duke Nicklede suddenly remarked that he did not know that he had an interest in palace banquets. But it seemed like he was not in the mood to have a casual talk with anyone. While glaring at the Duke, he warned that he would not say it twice, still demanding that they move. Because of that, they were forced to do as he said. Cedric invited Isla to leave as they glanced back at the newcomer. When the Marquis turned to Charlotte in order to ask if she was okay, he was taken aback to see that she was no longer in that spot, so he realized that she had already escaped. Meanwhile, outside the palace, Lady Lind was catching her breath while she was uttering how thankful she was to Yukon for showing up just exactly at the time that she needed. But then, her fangirling mode was activated while thinking that his character was so cool, which was the reason why he had become her favorite, even though his exposure in the original was just a little. However, her smile faded a little when she realized that she would probably not be going to see him again since she was not the female lead like Isla. Yet, instead of thinking about that matter further, she just decided to return home after coming out of the palace. While lying on her bed, she was thinking that a villainess should not get entangled with those who loved the female lead. Therefore, she decided to just keep her distance from the characters and live quietly, which was right for her role. At that moment, she still did not know why she fell into that book. However, she knew that she would be happy if she could continue living a peaceful life like the one she had. Although she was a bit disappointed, she guessed that she had no other choice. As she contemplated those things, she eventually dozed off to sleep. But soon after, she did not notice a blonde man from her window. Sensing someone's presence, she slightly opened her eyes, but to her surprise, she saw a hand and suddenly covered her mouth. Her eyes widened as he urged her to be quiet while stating that they would have a problem if she screamed. Charlotte tried to resist, but she could not believe that the person she was facing inside her room was the Crown Prince. He then whispered, claiming that it might be too sudden for her, but he admitted that he had just come to her for a favor. That only made the young lady confused. At that moment, he was no longer covering her mouth after confirming that she was already calm. But to her astonishment, the favor he was asking was that he wanted her to let him sleep in her bed. Charlotte was in great shock upon hearing his strange request. He then stated that she might think he had gone crazy for saying something like that, so he knew that he must explain the reason behind it to her. His Highness revealed that recently, whenever he lay down in bed, he started hearing a voice. That made her curious about what he was referring to. He then added that it was a disturbingly vivid hallucination that kept whispering insistently right by his ear. So often had he heard it that he could already memorize it word for word. He then uttered what the voice was saying, calling for the author, claiming that since the male lead belonged to the heroine, she would take the sub-male lead. Her eyes widened while listening to what he had exactly heard. But to her surprise, the voice's last word was that she wanted the sub-male lead to come to her bed right away. She rose in so much shock as realization hit her. She even asked for further confirmation of what he just shared. The popular romance web novel titled Looking for a Husband Candidate has reached an almost perfect rating with millions of views. The heroine, Isla Bean, could not inherit her parents' fortune unless she married for certain reasons. Therefore, she had no choice but to search for potential husband candidates, for which she found 4 options. The Crown Prince, the leader of the mercenaries, the genius wizard, and the one she ended up with, the Northern Grand Duke Cedric Hecklid, her childhood friend. That was a completely common storyline. But as a reader, she could not accept that it was not a de Gatsal ending where everyone would be living together in conclusion. Since it happened that way, she felt bad for the rest of the sub-male leads. She was not happy with the novel's conclusion, so she could not accept it as it was. Because of that, she flooded the website with her comments. But for the last one, she said that she did not care anymore. She declared that since Isla already had Cedric, she could just take all the cute sub-male leads for herself, so if only it were possible, she could have asked them to come to her bed. Charlotte widened her eyes in great shock after realizing that those were her words. She remembered that those were the comments that she had written. While she was stressing out with that revelation, the Crown Prince was thinking deeply about his concern. He then added that even though he did not know what that hallucination meant, he revealed that the face of Lady Lindsay kept appearing in his mind, so his instincts were like telling him to go to her, particularly to her bed. Calling her by her name, he inquired if she had ever put a curse on him. She abruptly denied it, which brought relief to Crown Prince Reynard. He remarked that he had also thought that there was no way that someone like her, who had no magical ability at all, could be the culprit. On top of that, she was known as Cedric Hecklid's leech, so he knew that she would hardly bother to put such a curse on him. Charlotte just forced a smile while listening to him. At some point, she felt lucky that he did not suspect her. However, she wondered why she also felt so unpleasant about it. His Highness then stated that because of that hallucination, he had been suffering from terrible insomnia for 10 days already, which was why he came to borrow her bed as a test. Lady Lindsay expressed that she had understood what he meant. However, she questioned shyly that it might be a bit much for a man to share the same bed with her. But the Crown Prince corrected that she would be sleeping somewhere else. The young lady was taken aback when she realized that he meant that she was getting kicked out of her own room. She could not respond for a moment, but as His Highness lay down, he apologized to her, asking her to at least understand his situation. But she was horrified when she saw him start undressing to put on his nightwear, exposing his well-built body. Glancing at her, he admitted that he was already at the limit of collapsing from exhaustion, and he was barely holding himself together. Her cheeks blushed with the way he stated it, so she replied that she understood him and bid him good night before coming out. Charlotte remained leaning on the wall when she left her room. She felt like she wanted to cry because it seemed like her comment was misunderstood. She wanted to complain to the author that she did not mean to let the sub-male lead sleep in her bed while she was getting kicked out. She then reluctantly left while pointing out in her mind how he had even brought pajamas, which made it look like he had come fully prepared. When the future emperor of the empire made a request, she knew that there was no way a mere noble lady could possibly refuse. A moment later, she was halted when she heard the Crown Prince calling her. Coming out of her door while holding a blanket, she immediately inquired if there was something that made him uncomfortable. She urged him to say anything and promised that she would prepare whatever he needed at once. But His Highness replied that it was not the reason why he followed her. He admitted that he felt guilty for taking over the bed while the host got kicked out, so he handed her the blanket, assuring her that he did not need it, so she could just take it and sleep on the sofa. Charlotte just smiled at him as she accepted it, but in her mind she was still disappointed that it was what he had followed her for. The Crown Prince was already lying on her bed while she was sniffing on the sofa. She was at least thankful that he had given her that blanket so she would not feel so cold. When she had just fallen asleep, the man suddenly whispered, urging her to wake up. She just rubbed her eyes as she inquired of him if there was something wrong. He admitted that he could not sleep, explaining that at first, he thought that he could finally get some rest from sleeping in her bed. However, all his drowsiness vanished in an instant. Leaning on the sofa, he stared at it while thinking about something. Then suddenly he pointed at it, saying that he wanted to sleep on the sofa. Charlotte could not believe that he had changed his decision and that he no longer wanted to be in her bed. In her eyes, it was evident that she was already sleepy and wanted to have a good one, but she could not since there was a man bugging her. The Crown Prince stated that he did not know either, but for some reason he had been wanting to lie down on that sofa since earlier. He then ordered the young lady to switch places with him and for her to sleep in the bed, which they actually did. For her, returning to the bed felt nice. However, she wondered if he was just messing with her and if His Highness really had nothing better to do. Just as she had closed her eyes, she heard the man whispering to her again, urging her to stand for a moment. When she rose up, she questioned what he wanted now. The Crown Prince told her that he suddenly felt like he must sleep on the bed again. It seemed like he had a problem with the sofa. However, he could not point out the exact reason behind it. Charlotte just crossed her arms while glaring at him. At that point, she felt like he was just messing with her. But her eyes widened when she realized something. Although she was hesitant since it seemed improper for a girl to say something like that, she fidgeted with her hand on the sheet and suggested that, in that case, perhaps the reason he could not sleep was that he needed to sleep with her. The Crown Prince closed his eyes, agreeing to her, explaining that what he needed was not simply her bed, which was the very place she fell asleep in. The two remained silent for a moment. Later on, His Highness cleared his throat and courteously requested her permission to allow her to ask properly once more. With so much respect, he requested Lady Lindsay to lie down beside him. Charlotte blushed at the way he asked her. She even stuttered when she granted him permission to sleep with her. Moving aside, she urged him to come to her bed. But before that, the Crown Prince stated that there was something that she needed to promise to him first. She looked up to him in confusion as she waited for what he was about to say. She did not expect that he would still want to ask a favor from her. His Highness then stated that first, the fact that he was suffering from terrible insomnia due to a curse must be kept secret from everyone else. Charlotte understood that since he was the Crown Prince of the Empire, he naturally had countless enemies, and allowing such disturbing news about him would certainly not be helpful to him, so she promised that she would keep it a secret. For his second condition, he crossed his arms with a smirk on his face as he warned her not to fall in love with him. The young lady was taken aback by his next favor, as if she was not intending for it to happen. But then she remembered that Crown Prince Reynard was supposed to be a narcissist in the settings, which she had forgotten since his public image was so perfect. Well, she could not deny that he was indeed good-looking. For his third and final condition, he gave her a brief glance before calmly withdrawing his sword. The lady froze in terror when he suddenly placed it on her bed. But to her surprise, he only wanted to put some line between them, reminding her not to cross the long sword barrier. He even casually informed her that whenever he was sleeping, he would reflexively attack if someone touched him even slightly. Her body began trembling as she heard that, and she even stuttered in reply to thank him for warning her. After stating all his conditions, they decided to sleep then. The Crown Prince had already closed his eyes while she remained awake, smiling slightly. Seeing his handsome face peacefully sleeping, she knew that she could not just sleep easily right after their agreement. The next day, the sunrise brought their mansion into a mesmerizing view. Inside the young lady's room, the Crown Prince stood and stretched his arms while claiming that he had just had the best sleep in a while, all because of the young lady. Charlotte just responded dryly that she was glad to hear that from him. She then inquired if he was still hearing those hallucinations. While getting dressed, His Highness replied that he did not experience such things last night. He shared that they were constant until yesterday, but when he slept beside her, it was quiet, which made him feel like the curse had been lifted completely. That made Lady Lindsay smile in relief. She felt like she was already saved, and she could finally sleep in peace. After he finished putting his cloak on, Crown Prince Reynard then assured her that he would surely repay his debt to the young lady, so he urged her to start thinking about what he wanted. With that, he just suddenly left. She was stunned to see that he was already gone. Just like what he instructed, she wondered what she really wanted in return. While staring at her balcony, she just honestly hoped nothing else complicated would happen because of it. Later that day, she went out wearing her casual red dress. Lady Charlotte was with her personal bodyguard, who was George. At that moment, she heard her stomach rumbling, indicating that she was already starving because she had ended up sleeping right until lunch after Crown Prince Reynard left. Fortunately, she felt glad while holding a pouch of money. She told herself that how she had stayed quiet and behaved lately had paid off when her father finally gave her allowance again. It had been so long since she was grounded. Just when she was thinking that she was going to save some money, she was flabbergasted when someone suddenly snatched the pouch out of her hand. She shouted that there was a thief who stole it from her, alerting other people while the suspect ran away. Turning to her personal bodyguard, she demanded that George catch the thief quickly. In so much panic, she claimed that it was the money for her independence. However, the knight just calmly told her that he was afraid that he was not able to do that. Leaning on his raised arms, he explained that his mission was to protect her, and he knew that he would get hurt while he was chasing someone, so he would just be the one in trouble. Lady Charlotte was taken aback by his response, wondering what the hell he had just spouted out. She then pointed her finger at the thief running away, exclaiming that he was just right in front of them, so she demanded that they catch him. But still, her bodyguard did not want to, as he believed that her safety was 100 times more important than money. While he was insisting that the knight move, they did not know that someone in the building was looking at them. Waiting for the perfect timing, he jumped and landed exactly on the thief. Charlotte was halted when she heard a man groaning, and to her surprise, she saw the mercenary on top of the person who had stolen her pouch. Seeing his red eyes behind the mask, she recognized that he was Eugenmont. Her bodyguard was in shock and questioned who that person was, while the young lady was just wondering what he was doing. Her eyes widened when he suddenly showed her the pouch of her allowance. She thanked her sincerely, but before she could get it from her, George suddenly stepped in between them. Seeing caution in his expression, he stated that the guy she was facing was quite suspicious, so he ordered her to step aside and stay away from him. But to his surprise, the young lady ordered him to step aside. Removing his arm that was blocking her, she clarified that the suspicious one was him. As he did not get what she had just said, he even stuttered when he asked her about it. She just crossed her arms and looked at him disappointedly, asking why he had refused her order to chase down the pickpocket earlier. The bodyguard just scratched his head, avoiding her gaze, and reasoned that he was just thinking of her safety. But the young lady just pointed out that he was someone who was so concerned about her safety that he seemed to imply that he would just let her run by herself straight into the thief, as she could not believe that a knight from the Marquis's house could not even handle a petty criminal. Glaring at him, she stated that she guessed they would get a truthful answer if she asked the thief whether he had an accomplice for doing it. Because of his response in such an emergency, she began to suspect him, which made the bodyguard grit his teeth. A few hours later, they just watched the knight and the thief being arrested. Suddenly, the masked man beside her was taken aback when she tried to confirm if he was Eugenmont, the mercenary king and the baron of the borderlands. She was smiling brightly when she addressed him and stated that she was not really sure what to call him. As the man remained speechless, she just bowed to him and thanked him for helping her out. Upon doing it, she wondered if it was the right way for her to express her gratitude to him, hoping that he would not be offended or anything. In her mind, she was fangirling again and wanted to cry in happiness that she was facing her favorite character in the story. Later on, the man replied that calling him by his name, Eugen, was just fine. That made her feel delighted and assured that she would address him that way next time. Since they had just met like that, she offered her hand to at least do a handshake with him. The man replied that he could, but first there was something that he wanted to ask her. However, before he could finish his words, someone suddenly called the young lady out. A voice shouted to his sister, which immediately caught her attention, and she glanced behind her and saw the red-haired man approaching. He could not believe that he would see her there. He was Jaden Lindsay, the villainess's younger brother and the rightful heir of their family. Charlotte immediately walked to him as he urged her to come home right away, while explaining that the city guard had just come to their house out of nowhere, which made their mother worried sick. With a smile on his face, he questioned his older sister if she was okay. The young lady was taken aback by the expression he was giving to her, wondering what was with him to smile at her like that when he usually acted as if he hated her. Either way, she knew that she should just do what he had said and get home before everything got worse. Because of her brother's sudden arrival, she had completely ignored the man who helped him. When the mercenary tried to get her attention, she frantically apologized to him that she had to leave right away and assured him that they could just talk at some other time. With that, he was only left watching the two walk away. As they made their way to her home, Charlotte was still wondering what was wrong with Jaden on that day, but the red-haired man just continued smiling, denying that he could not understand what she meant. At that moment, the mercenary stood alone in that street and uttered that she had just run off again. Later that evening, Charlotte, in her sleeping dress, went out to her balcony and recalled the incident that had happened earlier. At that point, she could not exactly blame her personal bodyguard, George, for acting insubordinate, as she understood that no knight would ever want to serve someone who only brought shame into the family. Also, the villainess used to take her temper out on the staff constantly. But then, she was still thankful for the incident since it resulted in everyone who had treated her poorly being replaced, and her brother was the one who made it happen. She did not expect Jaden to step in for her like that. From then on, she thought that she could finally enjoy some peaceful days without more chaos. But just as she considered that it would be the beginning of her great days, she suddenly saw a hand on her balcony. She was taken aback when a man with black hair and a pair of red eyes jumped in, greeting her with hello. She was surprised that she did not know how to respond. The man then stated that he was the one she had met earlier. That unfamiliar man then stated her complete name, Charlotte Lindsay. Seeing his red eyes, she figured out that he was Eugen Mont, the commander of the renowned Hesse Mercenary Corps, who was sought after by the greatest nobles and a man who earned the title King Mercenary, recognized for his monstrous power across countless battlefields. Because he always wore a helmet, no one had ever seen his true face, only his red eyes beneath it, and so Eugen became an object of fear. Contrary to that intimidating image, upon facing the man, she discovered that in reality, he was a completely astonishingly handsome man with a youthful allure. Standing before her, she could say that having a face like that on a well-built body like his was totally unfair. Hearing how she had uttered his name, she walked closer while asking if she knew who he was. Charlotte was taken aback when she realized that Eugen had never once removed his helmet in front of her. He then calmly stated that it was the first time that he had ever shown his face, which made her nervous. Fortunately, she was good at making excuses, as she just reasoned smoothly that she had recognized him because his voice was exactly the same as the one she had heard from him earlier. At that moment, she knew that she would not exactly say that it was only because she had already known him from the original story. The man then inquired if she was not shocked, clarifying that he was referring to his sudden visit, which she confirmed that she was absolutely not. Just like in the original, Eugen really did skip over 80% of what he ought to say. When he said that he had something to tell her, the young lady urged him to go ahead. But she simply uttered the word, talk, making her wonder if he meant them to talk more casually. Thinking that it must be it, she stated that from then on, she would now just call him Eugen. Although she was showing that she felt embarrassed, she was rejoicing in tears inside. As they entered her room, she inquired why exactly he had come to her. But to her astonishment, he just directly told her, while pointing to her bed, that he wanted to sleep there. Hearing a similar request, just like from the Crown Prince last night, she questioned him if he was having insomnia and if he perhaps saw visions or heard strange voices. To all her inquiries, he just replied that there was a voice that told him to lie on her bed. At that point, she was worried to hear the same problem with him, hoping that he would not tell her that she was cursed too. The mercenary then stated that his comrade told him about the one with the orange hair, whom he had been hearing telling him to come to her bed. While poking her forehead with her finger, she tried to clarify if he meant that his comrade said that the only one with the orange hair was her, which must be the reason why he kept trying to talk to her. Because of her comprehension, Eugen was impressed that she understood him so well. Because of her comment, she just scratched her nape shyly, claiming that it just worked out that way. But in her mind, she had been thinking about how overwhelming his cuteness was. To see the clueless Eugen, whom she had only known from the original story, she could say that he was too adorable. Upon agreeing to his request, she pointed to his outfit and inquired before he lay down if he was planning to climb on her bed dressed in his battle gear. The mercenary was halted, and all he could do was apologize to her. Therefore, since he had helped her earlier that afternoon, in return she would get him some pajamas. Before leaving, she reminded him not to step outside, and if it seemed like someone was coming, she instructed him to hide. Eugen just sat on her sofa and replied that he understood. Charlotte entered the laundry area of their house and tried to find men's pajamas that he could wear. She had expected that there should be some servant clothes that she could find in there. Upon searching further, she finally found one, but upon checking it and seeing the details of it, she commented that it seemed it was too fancy for sleepwear. Little did she know that her brother was already behind her, and he did not expect to see her there. Jaden then called his sister's attention, inquiring why she was standing there holding his pajamas. Charlotte was caught off guard and panicked as if she were caught doing something illegal. Hiding the clothes behind her, she reasoned that they looked a bit dusty, so she was just going to wash them. Her brother just commended her for being considerate, but as he laid his gaze on her, he straightened his posture and told her that he would believe her at that moment. Since she had been noticing something different in him, she started getting suspicious and wondered why he had been acting like that lately. Because of that, she tried to confront him in a way that he would not be offended. She stated that what she was going to say might sound strange. Pointing out that he really did not like her, she questioned why she was suddenly acting so kind to her. But her young brother just stepped forward, wondering if he really was the one who was acting, so he requested to let him ask in reverse. While looking directly in her eyes, he questioned whether it was his older sister who had changed recently. He even pointed out how she had suddenly declared that she was giving up on Duke Heckled. She was no longer throwing fits and not causing any trouble, so he had never thought that a person like her would change so much that fast. At that point, she worried that he could have figured out that she was not his real sister. There was even something that he wanted to add, but then he just decided to keep it to himself and turned his back. He then stated that if there were another chance, he would like to have a proper talk with her. Noting that it was already late, he urged her to return to her room safely. Upon leaving, the young lady was just filled with confusion, though she agreed with him. A moment later, she had already returned to her room and stated that she had already returned. However, she only found her room empty and silent and wondered where Yugen had gone. But then, she heard him whisper her name to call her attention. She was surprised to see that he was hiding under her bed. As he went out, she inquired why he was there, to which he simply answered that she had instructed him to hide. Charlotte just commended how obedient he was, but she told him that from then on, he must not crawl under the bed. She was even removing the dust from his head that he got from hiding. Yugen then smiled and stated that he had recognized that it was just her footsteps, which brought relief to both of them. But it also made her wonder if she had stepped too close. Later on, she just avoided his face and lent him the pajamas that she got for him, making the mercenary wonder if he should change into them. Charlotte then turned to him and confirmed it, but when she informed him that she would step outside for a moment, she had not finished her words when her eyes widened at what she saw. Without a hint of self-consciousness, he calmly removed his top, revealing broad shoulders and a well-built abdomen. When he glanced at her, he did not understand why she was intently covering her eyes with her hands while scolding him for taking his shirt off right in front of her, noting that she could definitely see everything. But in her mind, the goodness and evil were fighting. She was trying to convince herself that she was a proper person and she was not a creep. However, the part of him that still wanted to look one when she opened her fingers lightly, only to find that he was already finished dressing up. Seeing her reaction, the mercenary inquired what was wrong, but she just answered that it was nothing and she had just suddenly despised herself. When Yugen lay on her bed, he was surprised by how soft and comfortable it felt. As Charlotte pulled the blanket over herself, she reminded him to make sure he woke up before the maid came into her room the next morning, which he agreed to. Before drifting off to sleep, the mercenary softly wished her good night. With her back turned to him, she did not expect him to say that, so she stuttered when she replied to him the same way. They eventually spent a night sleeping together. But then, Charlotte felt something tight, heavy, and solid yet warm around her. When she opened her eyes, she was surprised to see that Yugen was embracing her while she was sleeping. At that moment, her eyes widened and her heart began to pound. Charlotte was taken aback when she saw how close his face was to hers as he slept soundly, while his arms wrapped around her. Panic surged through her, as she could not even state his simple name properly. Soon after, she was already calmed and began to study his face, checking if he was indeed sleeping well. Their closeness allowed her to notice the delicate details. The length of his eyelashes was pretty long. As she pointed her finger, she wondered if he would not be awakened if she just touched his eyelashes a little. But before she could do it, she was startled when he suddenly pulled her closer and tightened his arms around her. At that point, she felt like she was going to pass out in panic and wanted to call for help. But she could not bring herself to do it, or else they would be caught. The night in her bed had been uncomfortable since the man beside her kept moving around until he had lain on her body, which almost made her cry because of his heaviness. Because of that experience, she could say that he was such a wild sleeper. The next day, while looking at her, the mercenary wondered if she had had a good sleep. Charlotte, however, shot him a sharp look and retorted, asking if she appeared to have slept at all with the way she looked. Suddenly, concern immediately flashed across his face as he noticed how pale her skin appeared, so he inquired if she was sick. Despite being completely annoyed, she tried to calm her emotions and convinced herself that Yugen did not mean to be a wild sleeper. In fact, in exchange for her endurance, she got to stare at her favorite person's face all night. A moment later, she was startled when she heard the maid calling out to her, reminding her that she would be late for her meal, so she needed to hurry and wake up. Because of that, she frantically grabbed his things. She knew that there was no time for her to complain about how he ruined her sleep and urged him to move quickly. When he stepped out to her balcony, he glanced at her for the last time and genuinely thanked her for everything, wishing to see her again. After that, he immediately jumped out and ran away. The way he wished them to see each other again lingered on her mind while she watched him leave. To think that the curse was already broken, she believed that there was no reason for them to meet again. As she leaned on her palm, she smiled and said that it would still be nice if they happened to meet again by any chance. After preparing herself, she joined her family for breakfast, but her mom only pointed out that even though the maid had already woken her up, she still overslept until it was almost lunchtime. Looking at her disappointedly, she questioned the young lady about how she could be so lazy. That woman who had the same orange hair as her was Marchioness Lindsay, the villainess's biological mother. While the man beside her noted that her face was a mess, he inquired if she could not even have a good sleep. That person was Marquise Lindsay, her adoptive father. Charlotte just drank from her glass and smiled dryly, confirming that she had only had a little sleep. Honestly, she had less than 2 hours, which was why the dark smudge under her eyes was visible. Marchioness Lindsay then scolded her that if she walked around in such a state, she questioned what the other people would think of her as her mother. Before the argument could escalate further, the head of the house gently stopped her wife, assuring her that their daughter was already reflecting, but the woman just retorted at how he was too soft on that child. At that moment, the young lady felt guilty about how their day started at their breakfast table. She knew that Charlotte's mother had a huge inferiority complex about her commoner origins, so she understood how it was natural for her to consider the troublemaking Charlotte a nuisance. Later on, Jaden interjected respectfully, addressing their mother with measured words. He noted that he believed their argument should be enough, as he noted that his sister had been staying out of trouble lately. His statement instantly boosted the Marchioness's mood. Since she had heard it from him, she supposed that his claim was true, especially the fact that it was so strange that he would say such things to Charlotte. But the young lady just stared at him, wondering why he had really been acting like that since the last time. It had been half a year since she was possessed, and they had never even spoken. According to the original story, he was supposed to ignore Charlotte completely, yet his contrary action confused her more. In the original novel's setting, Jaden and his sister have a bad relationship. He was the son of the late former Marchioness, while Charlotte was the daughter who came along with the new mother of commoner birth. Setting aside the fact that his older stepsister, with whom he shared no blood, went from a commoner to a marquis's daughter, her attitude was also terrible, so no one could understand how Jaden must have felt. As she grew up, the only thing she did was cause scenes, and her personality was completely the worst. She went around shattering every bit of the family's honor. So if she were even in her brother's shoes, she would definitely hate the villainess. But then, since she knew that she was not originally part of their family, she did not know if it was okay for her to be with them, pretending to be the daughter, Charlotte. Later on, the Marquis cleared his throat and called the attention of the lady. When she glanced at him, he stated that since Jaden had said that she had been staying quiet lately, he suggested that she should go to a tea party for a change of pace. Seeing confusion on her face, their father revealed that there were some invitations that had recently arrived for her, so he ordered the chamberlain to bring them to her. Just as he had said, a box full of invitations was shown to her, so Marquis Lindsay urged her to choose among them. Her mother was even thrilled when she reminded her to also take that as her opportunity to look for a potential husband. At that moment, she felt so doomed and wanted to complain to the real Charlotte that she was supposed to be a villainess, but she could not help but wonder why she was so popular. Later on, an attendant came to her while holding a basket of flowers with a letter attached to it, making her wonder what it was for. He then told her that it was sent for her. Confused, she wondered who had given it to her. When she took the letter, she was surprised to see that it was from Kyrie, telling her that it was for her, who was beautiful like a flower. She gasped upon reading his name on it and remembered his angelic face. She could not help but wonder why the person would send something like that to her. As her family discovered that it was Kyrie, her mother inquired if he was the great mage who was rumored to flirt with the daughters of the various noble families. They were all confused as the Marquis wondered why the man known for being a playboy sent a basket of flowers to his daughter. But Charlotte's eyes widened when a realization struck her. As she thought about it, she remembered that Kyrie was one of the second male leads in the novel, so she had a strong feeling that the reason why he contacted her was similar to the two males who slept with him the other nights. If her guess was correct, she had to find it out. While looking at the invitation, she thought that she could meet him at one of those tea parties. So she thought hard about choosing which event Kyrie would attend. Among the envelopes, she knew that the red one with a seal of the letter M would be the right one. Showing the red invitation to her family, she declared that she would attend that tea party. Their parents would have allowed her to go, however, upon seeing the one she had chosen, they wondered if she had someone to go with. That was when she quickly checked its content and found out that it required a partner. With Charlotte's disastrous social life, there was no way that she would have someone like that. She just forced a laugh in front of them, trying to find an answer, but to her surprise, her brother volunteered to come with her. Her glance immediately landed on him with her questioning eyes, so Jaden stated that just because the event required a partner, it did not necessarily mean that she had to bring a lover or fiancé. While looking at her directly, he declared that he would be his sister's partner. Even their parents were surprised by his offer, making their father inquire if he was sick, to which their mother responded that she thought he must be when he had never even treated Charlotte like a real sister. Charlotte forced a smile as she expressed her appreciation to her younger brother. However, she could not find a reason to decline him. She might sound too suspicious, but she had to refuse no matter what. But before she could continue her words, Jaden suddenly stabbed his steak with his knife and demanded to know if she was planning on going with the fellow who had sent her that basket of flowers. Hearing that, Lady Lindsay abruptly denied it. All of a sudden, their mother interrupted, claiming that it was a great idea, urging them to go together. Their father then expressed his relief that the two siblings were finally getting along. At that point, Charlotte had no choice but to agree with them to make her little brother her partner. Marquis Mozella's mansion was the setting of the tea party. When their carriage had arrived, Jaden supported his older sister from coming down. For that event, they were wearing a pair of purple dresses and suits. As they walked into the entrance together, most of the visitors were surprised that Charlotte Lindsay had arrived, and next to her was her young brother, Jaden Lindsay. Some even expressed their admiration for the #1 bachelor of the empire, commenting that he was so handsome. The murmurs filled the crowd. Some of them were aware that the Lindsay siblings did not even associate with each other well, so they wondered why they were seeing them together. Knowing that fact, one whispered that it was obvious that his sister had probably begged him shamelessly. Various looks were laid on them, but most of the noble women glared at her with loathing and envy. However, despite being surrounded by the people who hated her, there was one person who was pleased to see her in that grand event. It was Kyrie, the famous wizard of the empire. At just one glance, he immediately recognized the girl with long orange hair. He knew that she was none other than Charlotte Lindsay. For the time being, I'll end this here. Did you enjoy the manhwa? If so, then check back for the next part. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for more.